It was 2 in the morning. The president of the central bank, Ibrahim Traoré, was still in his office with his phones ringing constantly. The economy minister was in an urgent meeting with a number of experts. Bad news appeared on the screen. French banks stop sending money to Burkina Faso, and the IMF suspends loan payments. CFA with Franc removed from the market, the nation's economy might implode in a matter of hours. This is how they've controlled us for years. Even our money isn't our own, Traoré shouted, slamming his fist against the table. Then, turning to his team, he presented a plan so audacious that everyone gaped in shock. "We can't do this," the finance minister replied. "Nobody has ever done it." Traoré grinned. "Then we'll be the first." While Burkina Faso's future was being cast into doubt, the tension in the presidential palace's meeting room was evident outside as Ouagadougou City's lights gleamed. With his hands clasped behind his back, Traoré approached the window and gazed out thoughtfully. "How much reserves do we have?" Dr. Amina Konaté, the president of the central bank, glanced at her file as he inquired, "Officially, $400 million. But most of it is held in accounts in Paris. We can't access it now. We have 78 tons of registered gold deposits." But Dr. Konaté was hesitant. "And that, too, is in France." Traoré questioned, "And gold?" Traoré finished grinning bitterly. "Economy. Mr. President, you must realize how terrible the situation is that you're threatening to leave." Minister Ousmane Sonko squirmed uneasily in his chair. The CFA's rejection by the West African Economic Union? Franc is committing economic suicide. Tell me, Sonko, how we can be an independent nation when we are unable to create our own currency. The CFA franc was the final link in the colonization chain. Troy turned fire in his eyes. Sonko extended his hands. "Mali is the system used throughout Africa. Niger Sagal stated that they are all always impoverished. Traoré is coming to the table. Do you know why? Because each time we print a banknote, we have to pay the French Treasury euros in exchange for the right to utilize our own funds." The meeting room became quiet. Everyone agreed that Traoré was correct, but for 70 years, West African nations had relied on the CFA franc, a French colonial monetary system, and freedom was only a paper document. Actual power remained in Paris. Dr. Konaté inhaled deeply. "We all know you're correct, Mr. President, but practically speaking, there is nothing we can do because we lack the infrastructure to print money and withdraw funds from banks tomorrow morning." Traoré put a file on the table, which is why I've been covertly preparing this for the past 3 months, and the advisors examined the file in a surprise operation. "Traoré," Sankara said. Everyone in the room gasped when Thomas Sankara unveiled the file containing his unfulfilled financial independence dream. Comprehensive blueprints for a new currency to replace the CFA. The finance minister, Franc the Burkina Gold, stutteringly said, "This is impossible. Without international recognition, our foreign exchange holdings are insufficient." Traoré grinned and took a tiny, shiny disc out of his pocket. It was a gold coin with a baobab tree on one side and the map of the nation on the other. He claimed that the prototype of Burkina Gold was made entirely of domestic gold that was extracted from our own brains and processed locally. But Dr. Konaté looked for words such as, "Foreign companies control our mines and monitor our gold exports." The economy minister's eyes gleamed no longer, and he leaped to his feet when he said, "You nationalize the gold mines." The operation started 3 hours ago, and the army is now taking control of all mines, and executives from French and American companies are being politely escorted to the border. Everyone in the room stared at each other in shock. "What about boycott sanctions?" Dr. Konaté asked. "The West will do everything to crush us," he said. "Of course they will want to punish us, but in order to punish us, they must first have access to us. This is where the second phase begins." He pressed a button, and a world map appeared on the screen with certain countries marked Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, and India. "Brazil, throughout the previous 6 months, we have confidential arrangements with certain nations," stated the economy minister said. "I didn't know about this," in a trembling voice. "We'll sell our gold directly to these countries, and they'll provide us with the technology and products we need." "You didn't need to know, Traoré," he said kindly. "If French intelligence had sensed even the slightest hint, the financial blockade we're experiencing today would have started months ago." Dr. Konate held the coin in her hand and held it to the light, saying, "Beautiful, but will people accept it?" "But habits don't change quickly." Traoré grinned. He opened a second file with ideas for digital wallets. The Burkina digital wallet read, "People have been keeping gold at jewelers for years. We're giving them something of real value instead of worthless paper money." Traoré is a free smartphone software that allows all citizens to use digital currency guaranteed by gold. 100% safe, transparent, and, most importantly, totally independent of the Western banking system. The finance minister shook his head, saying, "This is brilliant and crazy, but how can we convince the people right now?" "The link is ready, Mr. President." Traoré's assistant entered the room. Traoré turned to his team and persuaded them to let me show them. A big screen appeared, and the presidents of 5 different African nations, Mali, Niger, Guinea, Togo, and Benin, spoke. Traoré: "I think we've all heard the same thing. The West has used its economic weapon once more. However, this time, we're ready. And I'd want to explain our strategy." When the conference concluded 2 hours later, there was a renewed sense of purpose in the room. Fear had given way to Abraham's determination. Traoré looked at his advisers and said, "Dream is coming not just in Ouagadougou, but throughout Africa." Dr. Konate closed her laptop and said, "Will you make the announcement to the people tomorrow morning?" Traoré shook his head and said, "I'll do it now." He requested an emergency broadcast to the national television station, and it was approved in a matter of minutes as the team got ready. Traoré took one more look at the prototype in his hand, the gold coin shining in the early morning light. As though speaking to the revolutionary leader's ghost, he said, "Thomas Sankara, today we complete your unfinished work." Last night, French banks and Western financial institutions launched an economic war against our country, cutting off our access to our money, stopping transfers, and capping loans in homes, cafes, and on street screens. The people of Burkina Faso were surprised to see President Traoré on their televisions at 6:30 a.m. while they were preparing their breakfasts. He stood in his military uniform, calm but determined, and said, "I appear before you in these early hours to make an important announcement." People were looking at one another worriedly. "You know why they did this?" Traoré went on, "Because we demand control of our resources, because we say that Burkina Faso belongs to the Burkina Bay, and we want our independence. As of right now, we will no longer be using the colonial currency, the CFA, the camera said, focusing on the gold coin he was holding. "Franc, we start using our own money, the Burkina Gold, a currency backed by 100% domestic gold carrying real value." Then he held up his mobile phone, showing the app glowing on the screen. "And this is the Burkina digital wallet. It will be distributed free to every citizen. You no longer need banks for your money. The digital gold will be directly in your wallet." People stared at the screen in amazement for some. This was a frightening change for others. It was a long-awaited liberation. "Don't worry," said Traoré, as if reading their thoughts. "All the money in your CFA, Franc accounts will be converted to Burkina Gold. At twice the value, no one will lose. Everyone will gain after this sentence across the country." Small cries of joy and whispered questions could be heard. But most importantly, Traoré continued, "We will be the ones controlling our money. We will be the ones determining our destiny, and we are not doing this alone." The screen split, and next to him appeared the faces of other West African leaders. They all conveyed the same message: Mali, Niger, Guinea, Togo, and Benin, all leaving the CFA franc system on the same day at the same time and switching to their own gold-backed currency. "This is not a revolution, it's an evolution," said Traoré, "the final link in our independence. Now we are truly free." When the speech ended, something extraordinary began happening in the streets. Instead of rushing to banks in panic, people were discussing the Burkina digital wallet app they had started downloading on their phones. It was simple to use, sleek, and most importantly, it belonged to them. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. In Paris, at 7:45 a.m., the French central bank was in an emergency meeting. The executive responsible for the Africa desk was looking at the data on the screen. In horror, 6 countries left the system simultaneously. He said, trembling, "This is a coordinated move. And what's more?" "What more?" asked the bank president impatiently. "The digital wallets have been downloaded millions of times in just a few hours. People are embracing this. The banks are not experiencing a run." "I need to call the Ministry of Finance," the president said, reaching for his phone. "We must begin sanctions immediately." The assistant answered, "The ministry is already calling." The phone voice was in a frenzy. "Our influence over West Africa is eroding in Ouagadougou, as the mines are gone, and energy agreements have cancelled licenses for military bases." As anticipated, Ibrahim Traoré watched global reactions from his office. Doomsday scenarios were being shown in Western media. Africa's economic downfall commences, and West African nations commit suicide. Although Traoré condemns his people to famine, unexpected expressions of solidarity were arriving in Russia, China and India, Turkey, Brazil. South Africa extends congratulations, offers assistance, and pledges to accept their gold-backed currency. You won't believe the excitement with which Dr. Konaté entered the room. "President, the app has 4 million downloads, which is over 1/5 of our population. People have experienced freedom." Traoré grinned. Dr. Konaté added that there are thousands of downloads from other African nations, including Ghana, and that there is no turning back now. Sagal in Congo. A week later, as everyone was discussing this, Ibrahim Traoré stood in a tiny town square with the locals gathered around him. "I'm not sure how to use this, Mr. President," remarked an old farmer who was staring at the phone in his palm. Chili Traoré sat down beside him and allowed me to show you. He added softly, "Look, when you press this button, your wallet opens here, and you can see how many Burkina Golds you have." The elderly man's eyes brightened. "This is the true value of my money," he remarked. "This is your freedom, and nobody can take it away from you. You can't block transfers or freeze your bank account." "I feel like my money is safe with me," the villain remarked, quivering as he put the cell phone to his breast for the first time. Even though the World Bank and IMF analysts had projected that Burkina Faso wouldn't live for weeks, a month went by and the economy was still thriving, confirming the significance of what Traoré had done. 2 months went by, and trade volume started to rise. 3 months later, Ibrahim Traoré received an invitation to the BRICS summit in Moscow, where world leaders listened intently. Eastern and Southern nations were interested in learning more about West Africa's audacious initiative. When the Russian leader said, "You're bringing it back," is quite interesting. We haven't gone back to the past. The gold standard was abandoned 50 years ago. Traoré responded, "We're going to the future, digital gold, a currency backed by our own resources. This is next-generation independence." The Chinese leader leaned forward, saying, "Your digital wallet technology is impressive. It could offer an alternative model for the global financial system." Panic was sparked in the Western press by the accords Traoré signed for his nation during the meeting. Technology and infrastructure projects with China, direct energy and military agreements with Russia, food security initiatives with Brazil, industry and educational collaborations with Turkey, and cooperation in medicine and agriculture with India. Western newspaper headlines warned of Burkina Faso's departure from Nova Kafritsi in West Africa. As he returned to his homeland, Traoré simply grinned despite Xenia Tro's risky game. "We're not leaving the West," he said. "Dr. Konate. Rather, we're getting closer to the entire world and have numerous partners on his phone instead of just one master." The Burkina app for digital wallets shone. The figures were striking. There are 12 million active users, 2 million transactions each day in 6 countries. 0 hackers, 0 downtime. After 6 months, West African money backed by gold changed into African gold. 14 African nations adopted the CFA, the former colonial currency. Abraham, Franc vanished into the annals of history. Traoré was now regarded as the founder of a continental movement, in addition to being a national leader. One morning during the new Burkina Faso Central Bank building's opening, a woman in the back rows was crying. She was the wife of Thomas Sankara, the widow of Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, the visionary who was killed in a coup in 1987. "He would have loved to see this," she said, shaking Traoré's hand. Traoré stood at the podium behind magnificent gold-plated doors, revealing that the country's gold reserves reclaimed from the West were safely stored. He told the crowd, "We're not just opening a building today, we're opening a new page in our history." His greatest desire was to become financially independent. "We're bringing his vision to life," Traoré added, "but the only reason we can do this is because of the seeds he planted." Burkina Faso had not only created a currency, but also an ecosystem from mining to refining, from digital technology to security. Young engineers were working outside the city at the recently established Burkina Technology Center, creating a new version of the digital wallet app that was powered by blockchain technology, energy efficient, and most importantly, entirely designed and coded by Africans. The president of the IMF was grinning artificially while speaking in front of cameras. Our discussions with Burkina Faso and its partners are still ongoing, and we are looking into the translation of their new currency system. We must deal with them. We can no longer stop them. At a press conference, an African journalist questioned, "How do you assess West African countries' transition to gold-backed currency?" The French president had gone on an Africa tour, promising a fresh start to nations that had once been his colonies, but no one believed the old tales anymore. "We respect their independent decisions," the French leader replied tensely, "but I'd like to warn about the risks." A year ago, 6 countries took a bold step. Today, 22 African countries use the United African Gold. Our inflation rate has decreased, our trade volume has increased, and our technological investments have tripled. Ibrahim Traoré was back on the international stage, this time at the United Nations General Assembly podium. His speech was brief but impactful, but it was interrupted by laughter in the room. Western representatives moved uneasily, telling us that we couldn't succeed and that we would starve and collapse. An African nation had liberated itself from centuries of economic servitude, and this was only the beginning. Traoré grinned, but we didn't tell them anything. We just did it. The audience erupted in cheers,